One cup of coffee, one act of courage, a life forever changed. What would you think if one quiet morning you were sitting in a peaceful coffee shop and witnessed a young waitress boldly standing up to defend a customer being threatened by a group of aggressive men? Would you think she was reckless? That she was naive? Or maybe you'd admire the courage in her eyes, the kind that chooses to do what's right, even when the consequences could be severe? The story you're about to hear has no war, no miracles, and it's not a fairy tale. But it does have a powerful man, a seemingly ordinary girl, and a small coffee shop, where one act of kindness sparked a transformation far greater than anyone could have imagined. That man was Elon Musk. But on that day, he didn't walk in with a flashy car or an entourage. He was just a quiet customer, looking for a peaceful morning with a cup of black coffee and a slice of apple pie. And the girl, her name was May. Just a regular waitress, working quietly each day, never expecting to do anything extraordinary. But that day, she chose not to stay silent. And that one decision changed her life and the lives of everyone around her. If you've ever believed that kindness is small or weak, this story might just make you think again. Stay until the end of the video, because the lesson in this story might be exactly what you or someone you love needs right now. And if you love meaningful, emotional stories that carry powerful life values, don't forget to subscribe so we can continue sharing goodness, one story at a time. Part 1. A quiet morning and a quiet man. That morning, the city seemed to slow down by just a beat. Soft sunlight filtered through the tree branches lining the street, casting a warm glow on cobblestone sidewalks where hurried footsteps now moved a little more gently. The early breeze wasn't too cold, but just brisk enough to make one want to sit somewhere cozy, sip a hot cup of coffee, and let the noise of life fade into the background. It was on that very morning that a simple man walked through the streets, just like anyone else. No security detail, no luxury car, no cameras, no crowds. Just a middle-aged man in a checkered shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low to hide half his face. Unless you looked very closely, you'd never guess that man was Elon Musk, one of the most powerful and recognizable people on Earth. But today, he wasn't heading to an office. No meetings, no press releases, no tech announcements. Today, he simply wanted to be a normal person. Maybe after years of racing against time, technology, and the dream of taking humanity beyond Earth, he had come to miss the little things. A wooden table by the window, a black coffee, and a moment where no one knew who he was. He paused outside a small coffee shop called Cozy Brew, a place where the wooden chairs were worn with time, where soft music gently filled the air, and where no one paid too much attention to who was sitting next to them. Elon pushed open the wooden door. A tiny bell chimed overhead, like a warm hello at the start of a new day. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet. A few customers chatted softly. Someone was reading a newspaper. Someone else scribbled into a notebook. Everyone seemed to be savoring a rare moment of peace in an otherwise hectic world. Elon chose a small table by the window where the morning light streamed through the glass, painting soft golden streaks across the wood. He sat down and observed silently. No one recognized him, and he preferred it that way. A young waitress approached, offering a gentle smile. "Good morning, what can I get for you today?" Elon smiled back, his voice low and calm. "A cup of black coffee, please. And if you have apple pie, I'll take a slice." "Sure, I'll be right back." As she walked away, Elon turned to the window, his gaze drifting to the street outside. Distant yet peaceful in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. He wondered, if I weren't Elon Musk, what would life be like? Could I take slow walks, sit in little cafes like this every week? He didn't resent the fame, nor the responsibility. But some days, all a person wants is to be still, to be silent among strangers, to simply live like an ordinary man. What he didn't know was that this seemingly ordinary day would become the beginning of a story no one could have ever predicted. Part 2. Uninvited guests and a shift in the air. The atmosphere inside Cozy Brew still held its usual softness. Soft jazz tunes flowed from a small speaker in the corner, filling the space with vintage melodies that seemed to slow time itself. Elon took a slow sip of his coffee. The mild bitterness mixing with the scent of freshly baked apple pie offered a rare moment of calm, easing the weight of months filled with tension. But that peace wouldn't last long. The roar of an engine echoed from a distance, slicing through the stillness. Within seconds, the sharp screech of a motorcycle came to a stop right outside the cafe. The wooden door swung open. The bell rang again, but this time it wasn't gentle. 5 men walked in. They wore black leather jackets, ripped jeans, arms covered in tattoos, broad shoulders, intimidating posture. The smell of gasoline and cigarette smoke quickly invaded the warm, coffee-scented air, causing a few patrons to wrinkle their noses. Their loud voices and laughter drowned out the music. Elon looked at them. Not a flicker of fear, just quiet eyes, carefully watching. Leading the group was a tall man with a shaved head and a bold skull tattoo on his forearm. His name, as we'll later learn, was Brian. He scanned the room like he was choosing a target, until his eyes locked onto Elon sitting alone by the window. A crooked grin curled at the edge of his lips, half mocking, half daring. "Well, well, a gentleman enjoying his morning coffee alone?" Brian rasped, voice rough and biting. "You look more like a daydreaming poet than someone who belongs in a place like this." Elon gently set his cup down, his expression calm, his voice steady. "Just a regular Sunday morning. I suppose everyone deserves a little quiet now and then, don't you think?" The reply wasn't loud nor sharp, but it carried a weight. The kind that made Brian pause for just a brief moment. Then he burst out laughing, waving a hand for his buddies to join in. They laughed loudly, unfazed by the uncomfortable silence they brought with them. One of them walked over, casually picked up Elon's slice of apple pie, and turned it in his hands like a toy. "Apple pie, huh? Funny choice for a rich guy," he said, chuckling as he sniffed the pie. Elon said nothing at first, just looked him in the eye, then spoke calmly. "If you've picked it up, you might as well eat it. But remember, nothing in this world is free." His words were soft, but they hit like an arrow straight into their pride. The laughter stopped. The air in the cafe suddenly felt tight, like a string pulled taut. A few customers stood quietly and slipped out. Others bowed their heads, avoiding eye contact. Behind the counter, a young waitress had been watching it all unfold. Her eyes filled with concern, her hands trembling slightly as she held a serving tray. Her name was May, and she would be the first to stand, while the rest of the cafe remained silent. Part 3, a small voice in a silent crowd. As the air inside Cozy Brew thickened with tension and unease, nearly everyone chose silence. A few customers quietly got up, leaving half-finished coffees behind. Others kept their heads down, hoping the situation would pass without escalation. No one wanted to confront 5 aggressive men, especially Brian, who now stood across from Elon with arms crossed and eyes gleaming with threat. But one person refused to stay on the sidelines. The young waitress, May, still stood behind the counter, her hands tightly gripping a serving tray. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might leap from her chest. Every word from Brian, every crude action from the group made the air feel more suffocating. But what May couldn't bear was seeing a courteous man like Elon being treated unjustly in a public space. She knew that if no one spoke up, this cafe would lose the most sacred things it had: kindness and safety. May took a deep breath. Though her voice trembled, her eyes were steadier than ever. "Excuse me," she said, clearly, though not loudly. "This is a coffee shop, not a place for threats or disturbing others." The whole cafe turned to look at her. Brian raised an eyebrow and let out a mocking chuckle. He glanced at his crew and made a gesture, as if he'd just found a new toy to play with. "Well, look who spoke up, a little waitress girl trying to throw us out?" May didn't respond right away. She stepped out from behind the counter, still holding the tray close to her chest, like a paper-thin shield. But her gaze never wavered. "If you're not going to order, and you keep disturbing our guests," she said, her voice more stable now, even though her legs still shook, Then I'll have to call the police." That courage surprised many in the room. Some customers now looked at her differently, no longer avoiding eye contact, but with a hint of admiration. Brian stepped closer, his stare sharp like a blade. "You think this is a movie? You think you can scare us off?" May didn't flinch. She simply said one sentence, just one, but it made the entire cafe fall silent. "I'm not afraid, because everyone here deserves to be treated with respect." Her words rang like a bell, cutting through the fear that had gripped the room. At the windowside table, Elon gently placed his cup of coffee down. He stood, walked forward, not looking at Brian, but at May. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice warm and grounded. "And if people are wise, they'll listen to you." For the first time, the arrogance on Brian's face began to crack. The calm, commanding tone of a stranger, combined with the quiet bravery of a young woman, had started to shift the tide. And this was only the beginning. Part 4. The line between right and wrong, when courage comes at a cost. The air in Cozy Brew grew dense, as if the entire room was holding its breath before a storm. May's words still echoed in the silence, while all eyes turned to her. Not out of curiosity, but awe. A petite waitress, standing up to defend a customer, surrounded by men oozing intimidation and dominance. Brian, the ringleader, let out a crooked smile. He took a step forward, his stare sharp like a blade. The swirling tattoos on his arms made his presence even more menacing. Leaning in close to May, he growled, "And what if I don't leave? What are you gonna do? Call the cops?" May bit her lip, her gaze locked onto his. Her voice remained calm. "If you don't stop, I will." A moment of silence. Then, from across the cafe, there was a soft clink. Elon set his coffee cup down. He stood up slowly, saying nothing at first. His gaze met Brian's, serene on the surface, but carrying a quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. He didn't raise his voice, but his words rang clearly through the room. "I believe she's doing the right thing, and if you're wise, you'll listen to her." Brian spun around, his anger flaring. "And who the hell are you to tell me how to act?" Elon gave a faint smile. "Just someone who believes that respect is worth more than intimidation." Right then, as if fate had been waiting, the sharp wail of a police siren echoed from outside. May had called. 2 officers entered, their sharp eyes scanning the cafe. They didn't need much explanation. The energy in the room spoke for itself. One of Brian's men, the most hot-headed of the bunch, tried to lash out, but was quickly handcuffed and restrained. The rest, including Brian, backed off. But just before stepping out the door, Brian turned back, his glare burning into May. "You're gonna regret this." May stood tall. Her hands still clutched the tray tight against her chest, but her eyes, they did not waver. In them was the kind of courage that had already overcome fear. When the door finally closed behind them, the cafe remained still and silent. There were no cheers, no applause, like in fairy tales. What May received instead were hushed whispers, disapproving glances, and shaking heads. "Well, that ruined a Sunday. Who does she think she is?" Not everyone understood, and what broke May's heart the most wasn't the murmurs, but when Mr. John, the cafe owner, stepped out from the back room, his voice low and cold. "May, we need to talk." Part 5. The Cost of Doing Right. When kindness isn't welcome. The back door of the cafe clicked shut. No more sirens, no more shouting from strangers. But inside the small back room behind the bar, the air felt heavier than ever, almost suffocating. May stood facing Mr. John. His expression wasn't angry, but it was cold. A kind of coldness she had never seen from him before. The man who had given her her first job after college now stood with the look of someone weighing profit against principle. "Do you know what day it is today?" John asked, not waiting for an answer. "Sunday, our busiest day of the week. And half the cafe walked out halfway through because of what you did." May clenched her hands. "I just wanted to protect a customer." "Protect?" John's voice rose, controlled, but sharper now. Do you know what that looked like to the rest of the customers? It made them feel unsafe. This is a coffee shop, not a stage for heroes. He paced the room for a minute, then stopped and turned to face her directly. You think what happened was inspiring? Touching? One bad review online could tank our numbers. One video of that chaos, and this place is no longer the peaceful spot people used to know. May didn't respond right away. Her eyes dropped to her shoes, her chest tight with an ache she couldn't name. She didn't want praise. She didn't need applause. But maybe just a little understanding. Mr. John, what if it hadn't been Elon Musk today? What if it were someone else, a regular person, maybe even homeless? Who would have stood up for them? John sighed. That question hit something inside him, but as always, he came back to reality. The world doesn't run on ideals, May. It runs on stability. And if you want to keep working here, I need your word. This won't happen again. May stood in silence, not because she was afraid, but because she was facing the biggest question of her life. Do the right thing and pay the price, or stay quiet and keep your peace. After a long pause, she gave a small nod. I understand. She turned and walked out of the back room, back to the familiar counter. People were still sipping their coffee. A few glanced her way, some indifferent, some awkward, some vaguely sympathetic. Not a single word was said. May returned to work. Her hands prepared coffee, but her heart was no longer the same. The dream of kindness, now folded quietly into a corner of her chest. And then, as if fate had been watching all along, a familiar figure stepped through the glass doors of Cozy Brew, carrying with him a light she never saw coming. Part 6, A New Dawn, when integrity is answered Monday morning. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, casting soft streaks across the dark brown tile floor of Cozy Brew, just like any other morning. But for May, it didn't feel the same. A restless night after a tense day had left her eyes heavy. Still, she arrived early. She wiped every table, straightened every cup and chair, like a craftsman who still cared deeply for her craft, even if her heart was tangled in quiet turmoil. No one mentioned what happened the day before, but the silence itself spoke louder than any words. A few regulars avoided her gaze. Some whispered quietly. No one said anything to May. The world suddenly felt colder, and kindness, like something that shouldn't be done. Then 8:10 a.m. Sharp. The door chime rang softly, not irregular. The café seemed to pause. A sleek car had pulled up outside, and stepping through the door was none other than Elon Musk. But this time, he wasn't in a hoodie and worn-out jeans. He wore a tailored gray suit. Two assistants followed him at a respectful distance. And with him came a presence so commanding, it seemed to lower the volume of the entire room. May froze behind the counter. She was holding the coffee pot but couldn't pour. Why had he come back? Elon walked directly to the bar. His gaze was serious, but not cold. His voice rang out, low, clear, full of gravity. May, yesterday you did something most people wouldn't dare. You weren't just brave. You showed something the world desperately needs. Integrity. The entire cafe fell silent. Customers who had previously ignored her now turned, fully focused on the two of them. May's voice wavered as she bowed her head slightly. I just thought, everyone deserves respect. I couldn't just stand by. Elon nodded. His eyes held genuine admiration. That's exactly why I'm here, not just to thank you, but to offer you a position with Tesla's Social Welfare Foundation. We need people like you. People who will stand up at the right time, protect what's right, even when no one else will. A wave of shock swept through the cafe. May stood speechless. His words didn't feel real, but his eyes, his sincerity left no room for doubt. I don't know what to say. I never imagined something so small. Elon smiled gently. Sometimes, the entire world changes because one person chose to do the right thing at the hardest possible moment. Just then, Mr. John, the cafe owner, stepped out from the kitchen. His face went pale the moment he realized that the man he had scolded the day before was Elon Musk. Customers across the room slowly turned their gaze toward May, but this time, in their eyes, there was admiration, and perhaps a hint of remorse. An elderly woman whispered to her friend, "She was truly brave. I was wrong to judge her." May said nothing. She simply smiled, softly, without pride, in the same quiet way she had chosen kindness in the first place. And in that moment, a young barista became the symbol of something simple, yet profoundly noble, standing up for what's right. Part 7. When kindness doesn't need credit. An ending that becomes a beginning. That day, Cozy Brew felt like it had just gone through a sudden summer rain. Quiet, soaking, but leaving behind a strange clarity in the air. Like everything had been washed clean. May still stood behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she rinsed the recently used cups. But her eyes, they were different. Gone was the weary resignation. Now there was a new light. The kind of light that comes from someone who knows. She has just stepped into an entirely new chapter of her life. And indeed, just a few weeks after that unforgettable morning, she left the old cafe where she had worked for nearly 4 years. No complaints, no tears of bitterness. May walked away with gratitude for a place that had given her the space to grow, to believe that even the smallest people can make the biggest difference. At Tesla's Social Welfare Foundation, May was no longer a quiet barista. She became the program manager of Ordinary Voices, a support network for those who had been bullied, discriminated against, or lost in life's chaos, helping them rediscover their value and rebuild their trust in the world. Every day brought new emails from across the country. Single mothers on the edge, abandoned children, young adults ready to give up. Not because they were weak, but because no one had ever stood beside them. And May, with a heart that once knew fear, that had once been punished for doing the right thing, became a quiet source of hope. Not through grand speeches, but through the story she carried in silence. She never told anyone that Elon Musk had chosen her out of millions. No flashy announcements, no social media posts, because May believed the most beautiful acts are done in silence and remembered in the heart. Later, Mr. John, the owner of Cozy Brew, sent her a handwritten letter. "May, I was wrong. That day, I was afraid of losing customers. But I forgot something. This cafe wasn't just selling coffee, it was selling a feeling of safety and humanity. And you held on to that for me." May's story never made the evening news. It didn't go viral on the internet, but for those who had seen it, and for those who had felt it was nothing short of a miracle. Elon Musk once said in a private meeting, "The world isn't short on talent. What it's short on are people who choose what's right, even when it costs them something." May was one of those people, and on many quiet weekend afternoons, as sunlight slanted through the wide glass windows of Tesla's headquarters, you could still find her. Hair neatly tied, eyes peaceful, writing handwritten letters to strangers she'd never met. Not to be thanked, but to remind them, kindness doesn't need a name, but it is always remembered. Outro: one moment, one thank you, and a new beginning. That day, May lost her job simply for daring to defend a stranger. Alone, hurt, and confused, she never imagined that what seemed like a foolish act would touch the heart of one of the most powerful men in the world. And the very next morning, while the cafe still lingered in the echoes of chaos, Elon Musk came back. Not for coffee or apple pie, but with an opportunity that would change May's life forever. When Elon offered her a position at the social foundation he personally created, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath. No one expected that the girl who was once criticized, the girl who stood alone against injustice, would now become a symbol of courage and kindness that asks for nothing in return. May was no longer the timid waitress from yesterday. She became living proof that one right action at the right moment can lead to something truly extraordinary. And as for you, the one watching this video, Maybe you too have faced that moment of choice. Between silence and speaking up, between comfort and conscience. You don't have to be Elon Musk to change the world. Sometimes, all it takes is being yourself, genuine, kind, and refusing to look away when someone needs you. If this story warmed your heart even a little, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you love. Because maybe one day, on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, you will be the one who changes someone's life, with nothing more than a small act of kindness.